Please join me in welcoming to the stage from Future Growing, Mr. Tim Blank.
Good morning, everybody. I wish you were there. That was an absolutely awesome event. I was just thinking before I walked up on stage, it was 3 years ago, we were in Nashville, and there was very few tower gardens out there in this crowd. Now we have about 4,000 tower gardeners sitting out in the audience. Give yourself a big hand. This is so exciting. Today I'm talking about the state of the planet and the power of a plant. And what I'm going to kind of lay out today, before I get to the good news, might seem a little bit scary. You might have concerns for the environment, and just stick with me. Be patient, and I can assure you there's wonderful light at the end of the tunnel. Some of you know, over 20 years ago, I was blessed to work for the Walt Disney World Company at Epcot Center. Few people been there, right? Had the opportunity to spend 12 beautiful years at the land at Epcot managing those greenhouses where we grew 100 food crops from around the world using every hydroponic technology imaginable, so I know a little something about hydroponic systems. I was blessed to work with scientists from all over the world, travel the globe, and on my journey, I learned some interesting things. So a lot of people ask me quite often, well, that was amazing. How could you leave Disney? It was very clear to me the world needed change. I could clearly see the challenges in the world were not being met. That's why we founded Future Growing in 2005. Around the globe, the citizens of the world are crying out for change. You know, there isn't a person in this room who hasn't heard of too much rain or too much dry or carbon footprint, the massive amount of oil and petroleum and chemicals that we use on planet Earth. Society trends are still going in that direction. Agricultural imports in the U.S. have increased 145%. In fact, with modern agriculture, the state of California alone is providing up to 50% of the food you eat and 90% of leafy greens and lettuces. It's kind of a little bit off balance, isn't it? And so much of that food is shipped 3,000 miles across the country. We hear stories of bees dying, and everyone's trying to figure out, scientists are trying to figure out why is this happening. I can tell you, it's very simple. I'm a published research scientist, but I don't have to be to tell you that it's the massive use of chemicals, specifically a group of chemicals called the neonicotinoids that are killing the bees off. However, when you go up to the Green Gallo on the McKittrick Hotel into that beautiful farm, when Meredith and I were up there, and Ben over there, the bees were swarming around the towers. Anything that had a flower had a bumblebee, a honeybee, and these little bees I've never seen before. Some were blue, some had a little reddish hue to them. Why is that? We're in the middle of a glass and concrete city, and why is our rooftop garden swarming with beautiful pollinating bees? There's no chemicals, and the bees love that. What a special evening. You look at all that amazing produce. The bees are pollinating the strawberries, pollinating the tomatoes, the tomatillo. It was such a special night to watch people who had never picked food from a plant before. And all the food being served that night at the Green Gallo on the McKittrick Hotel rooftop didn't have sugar, preservatives, salts, and additives. It was just raw, flavorful, mind-blowing food off the Tower Garden. The event was supposed to last a couple hours. It went well into the evening because people couldn't stop eating the food. And, as we closed in on the event, I remember looking over at Ben and saying, how amazing it is that not only is this technology helping the planet, but here we are in the middle of a concrete and glass city, and we're in this beautiful private oasis up on a rooftop. See, you can make a city amazing. So back to some other interesting news. I don't know if anyone else in here was born like me around the time man first stepped foot on the moon, but the Wall Street Journal recently reported that our home, planet Earth, has lost 50% of all wildlife since man first stepped foot on the moon. And when I saw this story, I thought, wow, this is, one small step for man, 6 giant steps backwards for animal kind, right? Not very cool. The world is waking up. Just last month, the UN Climate Summit was held in New York City, and leaders from all over the world got together to address these concerns and working diligently to create an action plan to deal with the problems of the future, the carbon footprint, global warming, pesticides. But no bigger issue out there than water, because a human being can't survive much more than a day or two without water. The USAID says that 1/3 of all human beings globally will have chronic or severe water shortages by 2025. That is a single decade. That's 2.4 billion people without water or severely short on water in just 10 years. It's not our children's lifetime, our grandchildren, it's right now. A lot of people don't realize how much water food takes. If you look at that average plate of food at a restaurant from field to table, just go through that list real quick. 143 gallons of water for ice cream, 65 gallons of water to create a glass of milk, 2,600 gallons of water for a steak, 21 gallons for green beans, and down the list, 92 gallons of water for a little piece of butter. From field to table, all the water it takes to produce it and then process it to get it to your home plate. So food uses a lot of water. By the way, that side salad that uses 5 gallons only requires 1/8 of a gallon from the Tower Garden produce. You're a part of that solution. The western and the central part of the US have been in a drought for kind of off and on for a couple decades. In our country, we have an interesting story related to water, the water that isn't polluted. The USGS says that over the last 100 years, we have lost 264 trillion gallons of our water reservoir. Much of that is what we call prehistoric water. Water into the ground that came from eons ago that is not replaceable. It does not come from snowmelt. The last decade, we've been using that water 3 times faster. That's because of the drought, modern farming practices. Everybody's moving to irrigated crops to, get more money and benefit. So very serious issue. NASA, those of you out in the West, your water comes from the Colorado Basin. NASA just recently revealed that just in the last decade, we have lost 53 million acre feet of fresh water. Now, 1 acre foot is 326,000 gallons. Interesting stats. Anyone live around Lake Mead or in that vicinity? Quite a few of you. Well, I'm sure you've driven past. Lake Mead has lost water, and it's a very interesting paradigm what's happening there. Lake Mead supplies 40 million people and countless wildlife. And you can see what's just happened over the last decade. Did you also know Lake Mead is responsible for the Hoover Dam? The Hoover Dam, the power it generates is equal to 15 nuclear power plants. By 2015, they say that energy production is cut almost in half. So as we lose water, we also lose power to a region. This image shows the boat and how much water has actually been removed from that lake. Part of the challenge out west is the state of California, as I mentioned earlier, is providing 50% of the country with all its food supply and 90% of lettuces and leafy greens. And in that process, we're using a lot of water. It's a post-World War II paradigm that was created that was unsustainable. You can't grow in a desert and feed the country. There just isn't enough water to last. So we see it happening. I remember setting up Joy Kelly and Sandy Campbell's rooftop farm, Chapala Gardens, 3 years ago. And I remember Sandy and I were talking about it then, the water table in Santa Barbara dropping 5 feet a year. We were talking about this very thing happening, and sure enough, we've got several dozen communities now with severe water shortages. Literally, poor families having to truck water in and bottled water, and they're going to have to start relocating. Much of that groundwater in California is not coming back. It took decades to develop it. There's a picture of some of the recent water reservoirs in California. So the recent 3-year drought has magnified the problem, but the problem always existed. So we don't even hardly need the bridge anymore, right? To get through that reservoir. If you learn something about the history of farming, then you know kind of why we have these problems. In 1790, 90% of the US labor force worked on a farm. There were sustainable practices. They knew where their food came from. They didn't use chemicals. Today, it's less than 2% of the US labor force works on a farm. We've grown from the small family farm to these big mega farms, and we've become very, as a population, we've become very disconnected with our food. Food farming has turned into food factories. Did you know I can count on two hands, the number of big corporations that control the majority of food that you find in the average supermarket today? We call them the mega markets, up to 10,000 various products. These products are processed, they're preserved, they're supplemented, and these ultra-processed foods like fiber, micronutrients, and of course healthful plant substrates called phytochemicals, which are so important in the anti-aging process, and they protect us from heart disease, diabetes, and numerous other health challenges. All right, so enough of the doom and gloom, the bad news. I wanted you to be aware of what I saw 20 years ago when I was at Epcot. I wanted you to be aware of that looming crisis that I saw. So now that you know the challenges, the question is, what are the solutions? So the question you have to ask is, one person cannot solve the Earth's challenges. We're not that powerful individually. But the question is, how are we each individually supporting change to Mother Earth? There's so many great resources. You know, going back to my days at the land, I had the privilege to work with all those various hydroponic technologies. And that was great, but one of the, my biggest challenges was, well, this is great that we're doing it at Disney, but why can't everybody out here do it? Why can't the whole country do it? And we knew the future of growing was going to be aeroponics. It's the best form of hydroponics out there. And we knew that we had to grow vertically, right? Grow up instead of out because of limited space. And that picture you see on the left is our aeroponic greenhouse at the land. So we diligently worked hard in 2005 when we founded the company to develop the tower garden. We put the water at the bottom so the tower garden could be self-supporting, unlike other hydroponic technologies that you have to attach to something. We wanted to be able to make it any height, depending on where we're putting it. Most importantly, when we designed the reason aeroponics had not become mainstream was that the misters and things often associated with hydroponics created a lot of challenges. They would clog up. So when we developed this technology, we made sure that the holes up top were big enough so they would not clog. So we developed the first technology in the world that would be non-clogging. 50% of hydroponic systems use growing media. We got rid of the growing medium. Most importantly, we wanted a system that was a one-size-fits-all. Isn't that a beautiful tower garden? So a homeowner could grow 28 different crops, and you saw those beautiful pictures this morning, everything from a tomato to a cucumber to watermelon to head of lettuce. All those things grow beautifully in the tower garden. We had to make it more simple, and that was the birth of the tower garden. That's what makes it different than everything else out there. In fact, in the hydroponics world, it's complex, confusing, and there's a different system for each crop. And we solve that with the tower garden. In our commercial farms, we're growing everything from lettuce to bok choy to walls of tomatoes, okra up on a rooftop, cantaloupe, strawberries. I think most importantly, the tower garden is clinically proven. You know, I knew a lot about hydroponic science back in my days at Disney, did a lot of research with it, and one of the most important things we did with the tower garden was the same thing that NASA was doing for the astronauts in the space station. How do we make the nutrient solution more nutritious for the plants? And so we spent a few years developing the tower tonic you see today, which is made from some of the purest ionic earth minerals on Earth. And we didn't even just stop at what the plants need. We put a wide range of trace minerals in the tower tonic, which are important to human health. In fact, we recently did some research with the University of Mississippi, which was very, very exciting. They grew the tower gardens, compared them with the plants grown in the soil. They tested the minerals and the phytonutrients of the plants, and they determined that the tower garden produced equal to or better completely across the board on every single test, which is very, very exciting. I know you guys have heard this, But I wanted to, I wanted to mention it because it is something that really sets the Tower Garden apart from everybody else out there. What is out there is 5 decades old and, kind of the status quo. So we talked about the challenges that we're dealing with on the planet. And hopefully one of the things I wanted to point out is this is the only company in the United States that have a technology that's a solution to almost every one of those challenges we just talked about. Absolutely, we can grow anywhere in the world with this technology. We can grow almost every above ground vegetable, lettuce, herb crop. We're doing it with 90% less water. We just talked about that water crisis in California. Imagine if tomorrow they were using 90% less water, would there be a water crisis? Absolutely not. 90% less land. Land is limited. We don't have to use harmful chemicals, and we're dramatically reducing our carbon footprint by growing at home, growing on rooftops, and growing on local urban farms. I put this photo in here because every time I go to a major city and I look down at all that expensive real estate, I think to myself, remember that picture of California and all the red arrows? Every rooftop needs to have what? Tower Garden Farm. I'm not going to stop. I am not going to stop till every rooftop in this country that's able has a Tower Garden Farm. Who's with me on this journey? I am not going to stop. I am not going to stop till every balcony, till every apartment, till every patio, till every backyard has a Tower Garden. Who's with me on this journey? It's so simple. The solution is so simple. I want to share with you some, this is happening. Every day it's happening. Every day there's more people growing with Tower Gardens in their backyard. Every day we're opening a new farm. Just this summer, we had several dozen farms open up. Y'all remember Chef John Mooney, who founded the Bell Book and Candle, Manhattan's most successful and longest running roof-to-table farm. He took that same concept over to our nation's capital, right next to Michelle Obama there in the White House, who's an advocate for healthy school lunches. And I had a chance to visit John on his rooftop this summer and look at this amazing farm. Beautiful lettuce and herbs. And in fact, when I visited, the farm was growing so abundantly in the middle of summer that they actually had too much produce. It's just almost twice the size of the Bell Book and Candle. So we got herbs and edible flowers and a whole wall of strawberries that was equal to a 10,000 square foot plot on the ground, walls of tomatoes. And again, bees, even in Washington, D.C., the bees were everywhere all around the farm because we're not using chemicals. So hats off to John. In just a half a year of being open, they've received all that press. And if you want to know, how many of you here have been to the Bell Book and Candle? I know about 10% of you, so you got to head over to the Bidwell. It's a fantastic venue. This summer, we opened Scissortail Farms. I know you'd all been waiting a couple years for that one. The largest aeroponic farm in the world. And part of the country where 98% of all the fresh fruits and vegetables are shipped in. We're starting to bend that curve back, right? Tulsa gets cold in the winter. It gets hot in the summer. So we're doing all this in a state-of-the-art high-tech greenhouse so we can have perfect production, perfect year-round growing. True Garden. As I speak up here on stage, they are building towers at True Garden, getting ready to open their doors. The first high-tech greenhouse in the United States to grow cool season crops in the heat of the Phoenix summer. Very cool. And as far as I know, the first U.S. vegetable greenhouse to be running completely off of solar power. We've been moving into the islands around the world, Hawaii, the Caribbean. A lot of people look at an island and think, you don't have a water crisis, you're surrounded by water. That seawater is not drinkable. Almost every island in the world has very limited fresh water supplies. So we recently joined the Discovery family Discovery Resorts and opened Baker's Bay in the Bahamas, an absolutely beautiful 100-tower outdoor farm. Very exciting move. This summer, we also opened Orlando Urban Farms, the largest aeroponic farm now in the state of Florida. In a half a year, she's become a master growing lettuces and herbs and tomatoes. Look at those eggs. I got to go back to that picture. I love that picture. Those eggplants are 10 feet tall. Cucumbers. This is the craving of people who want to be healthy, people who want to be green. With 6 months of opening her doors, she's sold out every week, supplies 2 farmers markets and a community-supported agriculture, and can't keep up with the produce. Anyone into baseball? This was a very, very cool project. We started on this 2 years ago. The Giants Stadium is the first major sports venue in the world to house a sustainable organic garden. They're educating millions of people at every event because this garden has been on TV several times now. You walk out right into center field and you've got your restaurants, and right there the restaurants are walking out to the tower and picking the produce. President Obama recently honored the Giants for being the first green Major League Baseball team. Very, very exciting. Children, they got it tough today because they got all the advertising. They walk through a mega market and there's 10,000 products. All the products on that store shelf are those processed, preserved food items that the jar and the marketing costs more than the food inside. My good friend Dr. David Katz from Yale University says, why fruits and vegetables? They're the most important thing we could be putting in our bodies. The children growing up today will suffer more harm in their lifetime from poor diet and a lack of exercise than alcohol, tobacco, and drugs combined. It's just an alarming stat. So we're changing that. We're not just growing tower gardens on rooftops and balconies and backyards and farms. Where else are we growing tower gardens? In schools. Homes are coming. We've got to start with our leaders of tomorrow, re-educating them. And it's happening. It's happening all over the U.S. Farm-to-school programs are blossoming everywhere. These are the leaders of tomorrow. This is a farm in Hope for Kids Preschool, Santa Barbara, California, 2 years and running. Preschoolers getting up, starting their day, seeding plants, transplanting on the tower garden, and every day they're harvesting beautiful salads like this for lunch. An amazing story. This summer, we opened several farms around schools around the country. Very, very exciting, and it takes time and effort. There's our James Kaufman, the president of the company, and Doug Jacobs, one of our farm installers. They're meeting with the teachers, helping them develop curriculum, and inspiring them on how to integrate that farm, because a lot of schools don't know how to do this. They all think it's a great idea, but how does it happen? How do we deal with food safety? So we're addressing all those issues. As the farm grows, the lunch becomes healthier. As the lunch becomes healthier, the kids are happier. As the kids are happier, the curriculum becomes real and hands-on, and that's our mission. We're not going to stop with schools. More importantly than schools, where do we start with our children? At home. All my children have ever known is the Tower Garden. They've grown up with the Tower Garden, and this is the honest truth. Every morning we get up, we walk out there together, we take our Vitamix, and we fill it plumb full with kale, parsley, chard, spinach, and then we add 3 types of organic fruit to sweeten it up. Both myself, my wife, and my kids start with that every day. Pretty cool. And for those of you that aren't doing it, imagine if you could do this at home. Imagine, you think of these challenges that are going on in the world, the quality of our food supply, and the fact that how secure and safe you can feel by having one of these beautiful farms in your backyard or a beautiful tower garden, and your food supply isn't being interrupted, by all the challenges going on in the world. So it's very cool. In fact, I know those of you that have been growing in the Tower Garden for 3 years. I've been growing hydroponically for 20 years. I don't know about you, but I can't even buy lettuce or kale in the grocery store anymore, right? It's so good. It's so vibrant. My kids have so much energy. It's a proven fact that kids that grow their own fruits and vegetables eat more fruits and vegetables, And I have found also that my own kids and other kids get very interested in nature, right? Plant a seed, watch it germinate. My kids both go hiking with me regularly. Wherever I travel around the US, I take them with me and we do some amazing hikes. My daughter is so aware of what's going on around her, she will walk up to a tree that's older than the United States itself and give it a big hug and say, "I love you. Thank you for being here." It means a lot to me as a father to see my children growing up like that, because that's a much different attitude than the environment I grew up in, where just cut down a tree, it's ours to take and use. So there's a balance in everything. The state of the planet. I choose to see the planet differently. The state of our consciousness is also going to shift the state of the planet. Not just how much water we use, our attitude, what we choose to see, what we choose to believe the earth can become, it will become. I guarantee it. No matter where I travel, I try to remind myself of that. I recently was in northern Arizona and did a 12-mile round trek to the summit of Humphreys Peak, the tallest peak in northern Arizona. It's windy up there. The winds gust about 50 miles an hour, but it was interesting, the experience that I had up there with all the noise of the wind. It was the most quietest place I'd ever been. And looking out into the vast landscape, we could see the north rim of the Grand Canyon. And I thought to myself, God's creation is absolutely amazing. I was inspired to care for it even more. After that trip, we went over to the north rim of the Grand Canyon the next weekend, and I'm staring out at 70 million years of evolution. Amazing, amazing. And I thought to myself, what are we going to do as humans in the next 70, the next 700, all the way up to 7 million? What kind of an earth will we leave? I encourage you to be part of that change. Grow healthy, live happy, live an extraordinary life. Thank you so much, and I'm honored to be here with you.
Mr. Tim Blank, everyone.